The great hall of Blackthorn Ridge was silent, except for the crackle of torches along the stone walls. Alpha King Cale Ashford sat on his throne, his face carved from cold patience, watching the defeated beta of the Whitlock pack kneel before him. The war between their territories had ended 3 days earlier, and now came the matter of the debt. "You cannot pay what you owe me," Cale said, his voice low and final. "Your lands are ash. Your treasury is empty. What do you offer instead?" Beta Whitlock's hands trembled on his knees. Beside him stood a young woman with downcast eyes, her simple brown dress marked with dust from the long journey to the capital. She did not look like a warrior or a noble. She looked like someone who had learned, long ago, how to make herself small. "My daughter," the beta said, his voice cracking. "Elira. She is a healer, skilled with herbs and wounds. She will serve your pack well. Take her in place of the gold I cannot give you." A murmur rippled through the gathered court. Cale's jaw tightened. He had crushed this pack in battle to protect his people, not to collect servants. Yet the law of debts was older than his crown, and a king who broke his own laws lost the respect of his pack. He studied the young woman for the first time. She lifted her eyes to meet his. The air in the hall seemed to disappear. Cale's wolf, usually a silent presence beneath his human skin, surged forward with a force that nearly knocked the breath from him. Recognition, hunger, a pull so deep it felt like the floor had tilted beneath his feet. He gripped the arm of his throne to steady himself, his knuckles white. It was impossible. He had felt this only once before, 5 years ago, with a woman named Serral, who had been his true mate until a raid on their border took her from him forever. He had grieved her for years. He had told himself the bond died with her, that he would rule alone until the end of his days. And now this stranger, offered to him as payment for a debt like a sack of grain, stood before him and made his wolf howl with the exact same recognition. He said nothing. He could not let the court see what had just happened. "She will serve in my household," Cale said, forcing his voice into its usual flatness. "The debt is settled." Elira did not know why the king's eyes had lingered on her a moment too long, or why his voice had wavered before it hardened again. She only knew that she had been handed over like an object, and shame burned hot in her chest. She was human, without a wolf of her own, raised by the Whitlocks after they found her as an infant with no pack and no name. She had grown up feeling like an outsider even among outsiders. Now she was being taken to the stronghold of the man who had destroyed the only family she had. She kept her chin high as the guards led her away, refusing to let anyone see her cry. That night, Cale could not sleep. He paced the length of his chamber, his wolf restless beneath his skin, pulling him toward the servants' quarters, where Elira had been given a small room. He told himself it was nothing. A trick of grief, perhaps. Some cruel echo of Serral's memory, stirred up by exhaustion and war. But true mate bonds did not lie. Every shifter knew that. And the scent of Elira, warm, like sun-dried linen and crushed chamomile, had settled into his senses and refused to leave. He hated that he wanted to go to her. He hated more that some small, aching part of him felt as if Serral had somehow forgiven him for wanting to. Over the following weeks, Cale kept his distance in public, addressing Elira only when necessary, treating her the same as any other servant assigned to the kitchens and the healer's quarters. But privately, he found reasons to walk past the healing rooms. He noticed the careful, steady way she wrapped wounds, the gentleness in her voice when she spoke to frightened pack members who had been hurt in the war. He noticed that she never let herself be treated unkindly by other servants, that there was a quiet strength beneath her softness. Elira noticed him too. She told herself it was only natural to notice a king, but there was something else, an inexplicable pull she could not name, a warmth that spread through her chest whenever he was near, an anger that confused itself with longing whenever he walked away without speaking to her. She did not understand why her body responded to a man who had conquered her home and claimed her like property. She only knew that she dreamed of him at night, dreams she could not remember by morning, but that left her breathless, all the same. One evening, a young pack warrior was carried into the healing rooms with a deep wound across his side, bleeding badly from a training accident. Elira worked quickly, her hands steady despite the panic around her, packing the wound with herbs and pressing firm cloth against it, until the bleeding slowed. She stayed with him through the night, refusing to rest until she was certain he would live. By morning, the warrior was pale but breathing steadily, and word of the healer's skill spread through the stronghold. Chaol came to see for himself. He found Alira asleep in a chair beside the recovering warrior's bed, exhaustion finally claiming her. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her, something in his chest twisting painfully. She was not property. She had never been property. And the longer he pretended otherwise, the more it felt like a lie he was telling himself as much as anyone else. He learned, quietly, through the pack's old record keeper, that Alira had been found as an infant near the border between two ancient territories, wrapped in cloth marked with a symbol no one in the Whitlock pack had recognized. The Beta had simply raised her as his own, never learning where she came from. Chaol requested the cloth be brought to him, and when he saw the symbol stitched into its corner, his blood ran cold. It was the same symbol that had marked Serral's family line, a bloodline believed extinct after a plague swept through their ancestral lands 2 generations ago. He sat with this knowledge for days, turning it over like a stone in his hand. If Alira carried Serral's bloodline, if she was somehow connected to the woman he had loved and lost, then perhaps the bond he felt was not a betrayal of Serral's memory. Perhaps it was something else entirely, a continuation, a second chance neither of them had asked for but that fate had given anyway. Still, he could not simply tell Alira the truth, not yet. He did not know how to explain a bond she had never been taught to understand, especially while she still believed herself nothing more than payment for her family's debt. He began, instead, to change how he treated her. He asked her opinion on matters of the household. He walked with her in the gardens in the early mornings, when the rest of the stronghold was still asleep, and asked about her life before the war, about the herbs she loved to grow, about the family who had raised her, even though she had always felt like she did not quite belong to them. Alira found herself opening up to him despite her wariness, drawn in by the way he listened as if her words truly mattered. Not everyone in the stronghold welcomed this change. Chaol's cousin, Draven, had long resented standing in the king's shadow. He believed the throne should have passed to him, not to a cousin whose only advantage was birth order. He watched Chaol's growing attention to a servant girl with cold calculation, recognizing an opportunity when he saw one. A king distracted by a woman with no rank, no pack, and no proven bloodline, was a king who could be painted as weak, unfit, even bewitched. Draven began to whisper among the court. He spoke of curses and manipulation, suggesting that the girl had used some forbidden trick to cloud the king's judgment. Some of the older pack members, already uneasy about a human-raised outsider walking freely through the stronghold, began to listen. Alira felt the shift in how people looked at her. Whispers followed her through the halls. She tried to ignore them, focusing on her healing work, but the weight of suspicion pressed heavier each day. One night, unable to bear the growing rumors in silence, she confronted Chaol in the quiet of the garden. "They say I bewitched you," she said, her voice steady despite the hurt beneath it. "They say you have gone mad because of me. I do not understand what is happening, Chaol. I feel something when I am near you that I cannot explain, and I do not know if it is real or if I am simply losing my mind." Chaol looked at her for a long moment, and then, finally, he told her the truth. He told her about Serral, about the mate bond he thought had died with her, about the moment Alira had walked into his hall, and his wolf had recognized her, as if no time had passed at all. He told her about the cloth, the symbol, the bloodline that connected her to the woman he had loved and lost. Alira listened in stunned silence, tears gathering in her eyes. Not from sorrow, but from the overwhelming relief of finally understanding the pull she had felt since the moment she arrived. "I am not a replacement for her," she said quietly. "No," Chaol said, his voice rough with emotion. "You are not. I have thought about this more than you know. Serral gave me love once. You are not her ghost. You are your own person. And what I feel for you is not borrowed from a memory. It is new. It is yours." For the first time since her arrival, Alira let herself believe that the strange, powerful feeling between them was not a curse or a trick, but something real. Draven, however, was not finished. Sensing that his window to act was closing, he moved against them both. He gathered support among pack members still loyal to old traditions, arguing that a king bound to a woman of unknown and possibly cursed blood could not be trusted to rule. He called for a public challenge, demanding that Chaol either renounce the bond or prove his fitness to rule by defending it before the entire pack. Chaol did not hesitate. Before the full gathered court, with Draven standing across from him and Alira watching with her heart in her throat, Chaol declared the truth plainly. He spoke of the mate bond, of Alira's forgotten bloodline, of his own grief, and how it had, against all expectation, led him to something whole again. He tore up the record of the debt in front of every witness, declaring that Alira owed him nothing and never had. She was never payment, he said, his voice carrying across the silent hall. She is my mate, chosen by the same bond that chooses for every one of us. If any among you challenge that truth, you challenge me. Draven, cornered and desperate, called for combat, hoping to settle the matter with force rather than words. Chaol accepted without hesitation. The fight was swift and decisive. Years of discipline and quiet, controlled strength settled the matter in Chaol's favor within minutes. Draven yielded, his ambitions crushed along with his challenge, and the court's whispers died into silence. In the weeks that followed, peace settled over Blackthorn Ridge in a way it had not known in years. Alira's healing gifts, once viewed with suspicion, were now celebrated. Old pack members who had once eyed her with distrust began to seek her out, grateful for her steady hands and her patient kindness. She learned more about the bloodline she carried, discovering strengths within herself she had never known existed, gifts that came alive now that she understood where they came from. Chaol, for his part, found a peace he had not felt in years. He no longer carried Seryl's memory as a weight of grief, but as a gentle presence that had, in some strange and unexpected way, guided him toward Alira. He understood now that love did not always follow a straight path, and that second chances sometimes arrived wearing unfamiliar faces. On the night of their bonding ceremony, the great hall was filled with warmth instead of cold formality. Torches burned bright, and the pack gathered not out of duty, but out of genuine celebration. Alira stood beside Chaol, dressed not as a servant or a debt paid, but as a queen chosen by fate itself. As Chaol took her hand before the entire pack, he felt his wolf settle into a calm he had not known in 5 long years. Beside him stood not a payment, not a possession, but an equal. A woman who had walked into his hall in chains of circumstance and left it wearing a crown she had earned, simply by being exactly who she was. Alira looked out at the pack that had once feared and suspected her, now smiling and cheering for her, and felt, for the first time in her life, that she truly belonged somewhere. The debt that had brought her to Blackthorn Ridge was long forgotten. What remained was something far greater than gold could ever measure, a bond that neither war, nor grief, nor ambition could break, and a home she had finally found in the arms of the king who had once claimed her as payment, and instead discovered his truest treasure.